tomorrow night. And
yeah.
I'm a St. Cloud State Husky, and they're ranked 13th, and I'm like,
I'm a Husky too, but, you know.
well, I haven't
Never had
watched in
much allegiance.
not that I actually would be cheering for UMD, but I really would like to see it.
He was here last week when they were here.
They'll just turn the lights out and pass you by. Right?
Well, that's just it if we're not
Or
home.
they'll let you know that they're unhappy.
We told the woman that bought her house she should probably lock her door.
Right.
Because people will just be
Amount
wandering
of
in.
people like, where's
Actually,
where are the meatballs?
she should get some food.
Drinks. Leave it out.
Meet a lot of new people.
If we ever sold our house, Halloween, people would just be walking right in the door. And it's like, people have costumes on, walk right in, look, hey, where's the party?
All right, it's 6:30. I'll call the meeting to order. And we have everybody here except for the mayor. And that is why I'm here as acting mayor. So we'll see how this goes.
Faster?
Open forum. Anybody here to speak to anything? Wonderful. All right, ahead of schedule. Consent agenda. Anybody look over or have any alterations to the minutes from last meeting or any questions, anything they wanted to pull aside? Otherwise,
I move for approval.
there's a motion.
I will second.
All right, motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That is passed through. All right.
Nice job with those, by the way, Kim. There was an awful lot of information to share. Thank you.
All right, next thing is the Second Street Storm Sewer Project. There's two things, change order and a pay request. Anybody look at that or have questions on it?
I looked at it. Can you explain it a little bit, Mike, what actually took place down there?
For the change order or the actual project?
Well, the project and then what the change order, I mean, I read it here in the description, but if you could just kind of clarify, just in
So a quick reminder of what the project is. Part of the Highway 61 project would be to redirect some of the water that ends up downtown east, and it's going to end up in the intersection next to the credit union. And this project is our prep work for that. So we're upsizing the storm sewer pipe that heads down 2nd Street from the credit union intersection towards the sanitary sewer plant. We're also installing a treatment vault to catch sediment before it goes into the lake. So that's the project in a nutshell. The change order is because there are some utility service lines for the motel that are in 2nd Street, and they ended up being right in the way of where this pipe was going, so it was just an elevation that we weren't aware of before the project started, and we thought they'd miss, and they don't, so we don't really have an ability to re-engineer the entire storm sewer. It was easier to just relocate the utility lines, although easy is not a really good description of it. It was a significant project to relocate them, including some rock removal and turning off the utilities to the hotel for a bit. So that's what the change order pays for, and we'd ask you to approve. And then you've already done pay request number 1. Pay request number 2 is attached after the change order.
Does that answer that?
Yeah, I think it answers it, I mean, I guess the question I have is that when we have utility lines out in the street, and they're in a location where we're not anticipating them to be, like in this situation now, do we record and have a record of it as-built, of where the new stuff is, so that when we go back there in 50 years again and dig that up and try to do something down there, we'll understand and know where those utility lines are?
Yes, we will.
Good. Seems like on other projects, we haven't had that as-built information, and we've ended up having change orders on downtown in the city city sewer and water project downtown, that we were encountering a good number of those situations. And, you know, it's good to know that in the future that we'll have that reliable information for somebody else to use when another excavation has to take place.
Yeah, downtown, we, of course, were replacing utilities that were 70 years old, and now we have great drawings of what exists there. Second Street, I'm not sure when those utility lines were installed, but we don't have any good records of them. We essentially where they were, but, you know, being off by a foot or two elevation-wise is the difference between missing the pipe or going smack through the middle of it, so. And because there's rock over there, that's clearly why this all happened, and now we'll know. And also, these are significant utility connections, because it's to the hotel, it wasn't just a little line. If it's a normal connection, most of them are copper, that's not that hard to move around, but these were bigger ones, so.
Anybody else? If there's nothing else, I'd look for a motion to approve change order 1.
So moved.
Motion, second?
I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving change order 1, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And then pay request 2. Anything on that we need to talk about? Or anybody have any questions in regards to that?
And that's this page here, right?
Yeah, right.
Just this.
Yep.
Okay.
If there isn't any questions, then I would seek a motion to approve payment number 2. And
I will motion
all right,
payment, to approve payment number 2.
motion, is there a second?
I'll second that.
There'll be one more, I imagine, just one more pay request. This will
Yeah.
be done, actually, the project will be done any day now. I think they were gonna pave it today, but I don't know if that happened, so.
Didn't happen as of late this afternoon,
Yeah.
so.
So if we get one more crack at paving it, that'll be it.
And that's the balance then, right?
Yeah.
Or it wouldn't be anything different than that.
Well, this doesn't include, I don't think change order is in this math yet on the,
Oh, okay,
No.
so.
Okay.
There's a little additional,
Is the change order, I guess that's, so the change order would come through then on the final, right?
I think current payment due includes that word.
Okay. All right.
Includes the blacktopping or what?
No, includes what's been done, the change order
The
word,
change
not the
order?
blacktop.
Master payment, this previous certificates paid, current payment due. Okay,
So you're saying that just the balance is that $12,519?
Balance to
isn't
finish.
it 20?
20,000.
20.
20? Line number 9? Oh, separate page. We're looking at two different things.
Either of you want to chime in on that, or?
Well, that's
No.
plus the retainage, so, but the balance to finish is 12,000. And the retainage just gets
Oh.
released when the project is
When it's
completed.
done. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's only 12,000 left to pay.
Okay, any more discussion? Anything else? All right, all those in favor of approving pay request number 2 for the Second Street Stormwater Sewer Project, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And then, City Hall Liquor Store, that's you guys.
A little earlier this time than last time.
Yeah, we made the move this time to stay in town as opposed to trying to get back to Duluth. Last time we made it back to Duluth,
Oh,
but
that-
rather
Yeah.
late, yeah.
Oh, yes.
So,
Mhm.
We should have done that last time, done that this time. Very good, we're gonna get these set up. Great, well, we're getting connected here. The, oh, fantastic, okay. Do you want me to, Greg, or do the second one so you don't have to? Excellent. So, if you guys remember last time where we were at, we just kind of spent the day kind of doing some, talking with some people and kind of come up with some real rough ideas, really just to get the conversation started. And so you guys came back with, when presented some, kind of input, good input. And then we've gone back and we've taken some of those ideas and kind of thought some more about it. And tonight we're going to share those with you a bit. Just to remind you, none of this is what we're showing you today is necessarily anything that we're trying to sell. In other words, we're not saying that there's the solutions here. You guys should buy into it. It's really just these are some of our thoughts and some of the issues that we see that have cropped up. Some have kind of been reaffirmed, and others are like, oh, there's some different opportunities here. So keep in mind that there's a process that goes beyond this where we take your input and come back with yet another refined kind of version that gets closer to the actual pre-design. And then the other thing to remember is that the pre-design is just that. It's not the actual design. The purpose really is to get enough of an understanding of the program and your needs and wants and interests so we can put together some good numbers to it so then you guys can decide as a council whether to move forward into the actual design phase. So all of this that we're showing you is something that kind of gets revisited again at some point with your, when the project really gets moving forward. Okay? Okay. So this is what we'd like to talk about tonight. I'll give you a quick overview, some brief commentary on the site and the context. The revised concepts, there's two, and that's really where I think we'll spend the majority of the conversation. We'll talk a little bit about visual preference, and what that is we aren't showing anything tonight really about how we think the building might look. It's really just some examples of 1- and 2-story kind of buildings that are kind of considered contemporary kind of retail, small, kind of this type of building. And it's for you guys just to make some comments on, like, that's really awful, or that's really cool. We kind of like the vibe of that. And then we'll take those ideas, come up with visuals that the next time when we get together, we'll present, saying, here's kind of our interpretation of what we're doing. Then the construction sequence, there's really just one slide to talk about that. If you remember, that had to do with, can we really keep the liquor store open, portions of it, whatever? And we think there's an idea, but at this point, we really are just trying to get some feedback more from you guys to see if that's a direction that you'd like further interest in to develop. Okay. So are there any questions before we get started on that? Okay. So the first part I'm going to go through pretty quickly because I don't want to waste your time with things that we've gone through. And you might remember, obviously, you know your site. Remember, we had talked about a 2-story concept where we push everything up to the blue here represents the liquor store. Seemed to be kind of confirmed that the First and Broadway was the best place for the liquor store corner. And then in this case version, we put the council chambers and the city hall actually on top. And I think the real advantage to this only is if we're really trying to maximize parking is really what I think the primary goal was. And there was lots of talks back and forth about what it is. You guys kind of started to shy away from that a bit, saying maybe it might not be worth pursuing because for some of the costs and the functionality aspects of it. We tend to agree, but we'll talk more about that in a sec. And then there was the 1-story idea, and this is where we have, again, the liquor store up in the top. And essentially, we take what was on top of the liquor store and kind of plop it down into the southern part of the site. So from that, then if we move into the site, there's just a couple things. This is your existing site. There's some things that we went back and looked at again. And there's 3 major things here that we think are important. One is the property line that's done at the south end of Broadway, which is, I forgot what's the name of the street, the cross street at the bottom.
On the south side?
Wisconsin.
Oh,
On the south side,
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, thank you. So at Wisconsin, that property line that goes up, it actually is kind of outward to the east of your building. And so we're thinking at the very least, we should pull ourselves out to the full use of the property property line, which I think is also part of your guidelines, so that's one thing. So we gain a little bit of space, and that would be the same. Although I think in reality, we're already close, if not aligned, on the north side, but we'd make sure that we would pull all the way out to that. So that gives you a little bit more room on the site. The second thing is if you look at the, sorry, I'll take my finger, yeah, this right here, we thought it would be important probably to try to align a drive directly across from that parking lot. That's just for basic pedestrian and traffic safety. So when you pull out, someone's straight in front of you as opposed to off to a side, so you don't have to kind of time, are they going left and right, how that works. So I don't think that would necessarily be a deal breaker if we have to misalign that, because you would gain something from, you know, the overall design, but I think it's a good place to start to see if we can work that. The second thing is the red, or the third thing is the red curvy line with the arrow. And that is the reality that I think, after looking at all this, that is still going to have to be the primary route that our trucks will come in for the deliveries, not only for the liquor store, but for the other buildings that receive truck access. And the fact that it's kind of a long swoop like that is, there's many times semis that come through there, and of course they need a wider berth. So the idea of making sure that that's accommodated are kind of the three kind of primary things from a pure kind of site logistics. And then, of course, the fourth is maintaining the alley clearances, maybe not building up to that alley line at that time. One other thing is, and it'd be good to get some feedback from you guys, is we were hoping that, I think there's approximately 25 cars parked on the site right now. And all of our designs have tried to maintain that as best as we can. And I'm assuming that's probably a good thing, but I don't know if that's necessarily, you know, a driver that you guys would, you know, give up something to maintain that number. So it's something I think that would be good to know of how you would interpret the fact that we may have to give up a few, or add a few to that line. So those are the kind of the main site considerations. And please ask questions as we go. I'm fine to do that. So the next one, you know, again, looking at the two-story, one-story idea, if we plop everything up on up in that two-story, from a site standpoint, from an urban design standpoint, as we call it, we're not thrilled about what that does for the pedestrian kind of experience of people walking along the street. You still have that big gap between the buildings along Wisconsin and City Hall that we think is not of the in the best interest of a walkable city. And I know that was one of the guidelines, is that we keep the pedestrian experience in hand. So even from a kind of an urban design standpoint, let alone some of the construction factors about building two stories, we thought that it made sense to perhaps look at, again, with a one story. And you can see it basically fills that out. Again, these are just diagrams. But it makes for that experience of walking along Wisconsin in particular, I mean, Broadway, a much more interesting kind of experience, and I think fits that texture and the pattern that we're trying to keep in Grand Marais. So back, continuing on the one story, you guys have a whole mix of one and two story buildings around that you guys are very familiar with. So having a one story building, I think, is you know, certainly fits with the category. If we have two, that works too. You know, you've got it all over, and you can see that there's really a lot of up and down too in your facades. You know, there's never really a long big block of anything that, and that's what makes part of the charm, I would say, and part of the visual interest for smaller towns, is they have that scale that we, you know, you call it human scale, but people really relate very well to that, and it's one of the reasons they find coming to Grand Marais of interest. It's kind of this little shop to shop. So ultimately, we're thinking that it makes sense to kind of pick up on that up and down, not worry about having a big block, and so we're leaning towards this idea of a one story with a variation of the parapet along those lines. Our floor to floor or floor to roof will be higher than a typical one built at the, you know, in the early in the 20th century or before, just because we'll be doing things differently, not only to accommodate construction, but the HVAC and other things that are common now in our buildings. And particularly on the retail side, they have, as you know, you can experience, they have a much higher ceiling in those spaces, and that's become kind of the regular. They're literally like 16 or 18 feet clear, and that's become part of the typical language of retail environments. And I think if you go to lots of newer stores, that's the way they're constructed. So we'll have a higher, so it's going to have a bigger presence than just, for example, the Ben Franklin. So it's not going to look, so it won't look flat like that as much, but much taller. But regardless, it's our job to come back with new things and ideas to present to you as we go forward. The other thing I want to mention with these two is that there's been conversations about whether we have a sloped roof or a flat roof. And by flat roof, of course, it's not dead flat, it's just very low slope. We're going to have to come back. Again, we're kind of leaning towards, we think that's a difficult thing to kind of make happen with a larger building, because it will be a larger building without having a very tall roof on it, because as you imagine, that goes up, even with a very slow roof at a 1 to 3 slope or 3 to 12 slope. It'll really be quite big, lots of snow that we have to control coming off, so we're not exactly convinced that we can make that work in an aesthetically pleasing way. But as we talked to Mike earlier, we'll have to come back and talk about and show you some examples of what we think works and doesn't work. But just trying to put our general ideas and feelings on the table right now as we look at it, we think that it might be difficult. And of course, going around town, most of the bigger buildings or blocks like this are flat. Again, they're not technically exactly dead flat, they slope, but you don't see that. And you have really charming smaller buildings that have the sloped roofs, and that kind of works with this kind of interesting character. But it's something that we just want to let you know that we're trying to work our way through that, and we'll come back with more ideas on that. So now getting into the actual plans, we'll come up with a couple of revised options here. So the existing facility, as we've talked, it's about 11,500. Some people call it 12,000, depending on how you measure and what you measure. We told you when we went through the kind of existing kind of crazy quilt of spaces that it really works out to about only 8,700 square feet of what we would call net. That's the usable. So that's about a 70% efficiency, which is pretty inefficient. Not as inefficient as I thought it would be for a commercial building. Typically they're up closer to 85. So you're definitely, as you guys know, have a very inefficient footprint, but just so you could kind of understand that, how that works. So if you remember, we took your conversation, and we took conversations that we had with staff, the department heads, and some of your partner groups, and then have come up with some variations. And so the next 2 slides kind of show that. And for clarity, we're going to rotate this, so north will be to your left on the slides, not up. And that's so we can make the drawings bigger. Does everyone understand that? See, it'll flip. Does everyone understand that? You can see, okay. Okay, so I'm going to stand up. Is that okay? Can you get, if I stand up? Oh, yeah. Do that. So I can point to things more easily. So again, this is an idea that is actually built closely on one of the one-story versions, and that was where we had talked about having this kind of walk-through kind of connection. And the purpose of this was that we felt that primarily by building a council chamber that was going to be bigger, and we'll talk a little bit about how much bigger as we get through this, that when you walk out of a council chamber, typically it's nice to be able to ideally kind of split out the number of people going. Now that assumes we're having larger meetings. A meeting like tonight, it doesn't matter, but when you have bigger ones like the last time, so people aren't all shepherding back their way out through one door. So it just gives kind of that options. It gives a place where we could have some handicap parking that could be close by for that. Also for close by parking handicap that could be off the path for meeting City Hall. And you could have some dedicated short-term parking, if you like, for the liquor store as well. So these could all be controlled and give an accessible spot there. So the idea, the way this works out now is we've accommodated basically the liquor store here. We talked with Chris a little bit earlier. And technically what this does is it essentially meets the program that Jim McComb had actually presented to you in terms of what was needed, the amount of cooler, the reach-in cooler, the length of that, having the, perhaps a beer cave, et cetera. Then provides the office in the back and the break room and storage and good delivery, all those things. Kind of enter in at the corner, which is kind of what we call the 100% retail corner. You have basically the checkout this way. You enter here and work your way clockwise, counterclockwise around back through the store. This is not meant to be a final, or even a really, there's still some things about this that aren't right, but the idea was to show how it generally might be configured. And this works out to be in that 5,500 or so square feet, and you currently, including all your storage and everything right now, are about 35 or 37, I think, is what is 3,700. So we'll show that in a minute. But what moving the plan, making it move to the south or north, we basically have the public bathrooms. And this idea was, if you remember, as an idea that the public bathrooms would actually be accessed from inside the building. In other words, you might keep this as a kind of a public interior street open until a certain amount of time at night, and then close it maybe at midnight, 1 o'clock or whatever, just as an idea for you to consider. That way, the idea is you wouldn't have to build 2 sets of bathrooms, one for the exterior outside public and one for the interior. So it was just an idea that we thought was worth kind of exploring. It also has basically the utility room and a large centralized delivery area that you would pull in here, your box trucks. And it also provides for a larger public meeting room that could be available to the public or to your partner groups. There's also a conversation that we had that you need to kind of help us kind of resolve or come to some sort of direction on, is how you might want to share space with your partner organizations, EDA, small business, adult education, et cetera. So this version could kind of create this into a suite that might accommodate your partnership organizations. At that point, they would be kind of part of City Hall, but they would also have their own entrance. So it would be kind of on a public way, if you will. So that would be something that you would need to kind of talk about internally and give us some direction on whether you really want to go that way. Considering our meeting with your groups, I think they would need about 1,100 square feet of space, and that would accommodate the again, the chamber, the EDA, small business, adult education, and Arrowhead. So I think that that's kind of in that range, about 6 offices, 5 offices, small conference, et cetera. So that's something that I think is important. So this kind of concept works well with that. Then we have the council chambers in back with storage. This is set up that it could be a permanent dais or not. It wouldn't have to be. It could still be furniture that could be moved. But this particular version shows a capacity of about 120. And I know that seems incredibly large, but that's just the way it kind of claimed out there. So another thing we need you to talk about is really what you really think the maximum size would be. And would you want to be able to have it cleared out and used for different activities? Whether it's other community events that could happen in there or not. Because this would give you an opportunity to provide perhaps a little bit bigger space that might be used by different community members. It would be set up, it would not be a permanent setup like you have here. And then we'd have storage where all this stuff could be pulled at. You could pull up pool tables or do whatever you want. Then the last thing really is City Hall, plus in the upper right is the small garage that may or may not be required, but it was kind of requested by your department heads. But this requires, or this basically gives you basically 4 internal offices of potential expansion into a 5th office, but that would also be used temporarily as a small meeting room, which is needed. You'd have an open office area, storage, and you'd have a back door directly into the council chambers. And so you guys could access out back, you could get support from staff, and there'd also be a small bathroom back there too that could be used if you needed to during a council meeting. Also gives you a back door out if necessary. You have basically the counter, public walk-up counter, and then conference room, et cetera, and then plus a back door, you could have staff parking out there. So this version works in at about 15,600. And you remember you're at 11,500 right now, so it's actually an add of about 4,000 square feet overall to do this. Okay? So then we thought, well, that's big, how can we make this tighter and maybe get some other things that we had talked about? So the next slide, thanks Sarah, is I think I would just, the workings of the liquor store essentially stays the same, and we'll be working more closely with Chris and making sure that we meet Jim McComb's kind of criteria with this as we go, and we'll meet next time with Chris to go through that in more detail. In this case, the council chamber moves to the center. It still has the same access out the back. This one gets a little bit smaller. It's more, for example, like 100, 105, 108 kind of folks, so it starts to get a little bit smaller. You can see it now has a small centralized kind of lobby, or smaller, still 20 by 20 or so. It has a conference room that's not as large as the previous one. So this kind of takes out the possibility, or the easy possibility, of having your partnership organizations be part of this. You see that? That's how we've kind of condensed this. We've kind of taken them out of this picture to get us down to 13,900, so it makes it a little bit easier. You have the internal restrooms in the light blue that's used for everyone, but then in the darker blue we go back to the concept of having the public restrooms be accessible to the public 24 or whatever, and you never cross over general public that might just need it, as opposed to maybe activities that's going on in the council or in the city hall at that same time. So this, we can still group all the plumbing. We can kind of create a better kind of landscaped and a more welcome kind of area to the visitors. You still basically organize the city hall much the same way. It's a little bit smaller. We only provide for 4 offices instead of 5, and we still provide for a small garage off the back and workshop. And this would be the employee entrance off the back. You'd still have exits off here, emergency and otherwise. It also eliminates the kind of centralized delivery, and in this case you deliver straight into the back of the liquor store, as opposed to having an offloading space and then transferring it into the liquor store. So you could actually have a, if you go back one, sorry Sarah. So you could offload in this area, close the door, let the temperatures separate, and then go in, so you're not, it's kind of like a vestibule for the storage. I mean, it's a good idea, but it costs money, obviously, to build a space like that. So if we advance again. So that's really gets us to the 13,900. It also gives us, as you can see, another row of parking along that way. Mike pointed out, of course, that the way that's drawn right there, it's one way, and that's a bit of a problem, because if this is backed up with trucks and someone pulls into there, they kind of get jammed in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I see on both of these options that, to me, seem somewhat problematic, in that those parking areas along the backside of the liquor store, where the deliveries would come in, if trucks pull in there, they a lot of times are there for an extended period of time. If somebody's already parked there, comes back, they can't get out of their parking space.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how often that might happen, but I would think that it would be a problem.
I've heard Thursdays before noon, don't even think of parking there. But Mike pointed out that now a lot of the public employees park there, and they don't park there on the days that they know the trucks are going to be there. Isn't that kind of what you guys said? Or move if they come in. So it's a good point, and I think that's something that we've kind of learned more about it since we've been here. So we have to think about that. It's kind of hard just to give it up, though, I think, for just the time the deliveries are, and not use that space for the parking. But,
Well, I would agree. I mean, I think the parking is important, and trying to manage both the parking and the deliveries, and it's going to take some thought.
yeah.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like, what if everything, I mean, I know like the focus is the corner of First and Broadway, but what if it's just everything, it kind of flip-flop? You keep the alley side and just shift everything to the south, and you put the parking off on kind of along First Street, so that as you come down First Street, you can come in and park, and then you can leave, and if you're coming off Broadway to get into Park, then you can pull in, and then when you leave, you take a right out onto First Street and get back out on the traffic.
Right.
I don't know,
So-
I mean, there's probably some reason why that doesn't
Well,
work.
so,
but-
there are a couple things. One, primarily, I think the way the semis, because there are semis come in, I think they have to do a pull-through. And if we take out that middle block, they come in and then they have to back down towards those others. It's really difficult to get them here and then swing in and back all the way around. I mean, they can do that, but then that a lot of times that really messes up City 2 when you have semis backing up
Sure.
down things. So it's a little bit of
Yeah, right.
that logistics is a problem. The other thing too is I would think I think our city, our ordinances, we want our buildings pulled up, to try to again keep that, so it would be going against our own ordinances, your ordinances in terms of that. Anyway, so we can go into, but next slide. So just there's four main areas that we're kind of adding space to. I thought that it might be interesting for you to see. So these represent approximate areas of existing in the red. So that's the approximate area of the current liquor store. And you can see, if this doesn't have the color, but you can see that again, we're adding about 50% again to the existing store. The council chambers, the red dashed box there, is about what we have now. And you can see essentially this version doubles it. So imagine this room twice the size. So you have to kind of, is that really, what you're interested in? And we can make that smaller, we can do other things, but that's part of the, I know typically we're saying the 80. I thought I'd heard that we were interested maybe in having 100. This kind of goes farther than that, but that's something to consider. City Hall gets a little bit bigger. This is about what we have now, but considering some of the short on the meeting rooms, and some of the, I think, better storage areas and making configurations so we connect better to the council chambers, that we're going to gain some there, I think. Again, that can be shorter, and some of the storage that we're trying to bring into that space. Third, you can see, or fourth, you can see that there's a need, apparently, maybe not, some of the department heads that think that we need a small garage still as part of this, but we're also talking about it's not going to be as big. It's going to really be more the size of a family two-car garage, 24 by 24, where they get a workbench and bring in small equipment if they need to be. But that's something that you might be considered, but there we're actually shrinking. And then the last thing that's adding to this in particular one is that we are kind of introducing more public space. So when you come in, you're not always into a small vestibule or a small little like that. There's actually a kind of a larger vestibule, if you will, public gathering space, either before meetings and just a sense of kind of civic presence. So that's the kind of the 5 things that are affecting the basic kind of square footage. So so maybe right now we can go through some more questions on this, both of these. Again, you can see that we're kind of thinking that the 1-story works better than even getting too much detail into the 2-story, but I don't know if you have any other questions about pros and cons of either one that might interest you more than the other. I don't know if we can go back a couple, Sarah. Yeah. So is the idea of the pass-through and the opportunities that might give to this, and then also the idea of having the public toilets be shared with the general public and, I guess, visitors, or...
I think the size of the council chambers on the second one is much more adequate. I mean, I think it'd be wonderful if there was that much engagement at the meetings, positive or negative,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a, 3 times a year situation.
But you're now designing something
not
that's...
Not even.
No, but you are designing something that's gonna be here hopefully for the next
Oh, yeah.
40 years or more.
But if one of them did 100 and the other one did 150, that's all I meant. It's like
yep,
100 seems, because
I-
was there like 60 people here last week?
Yeah.
Not quite, and the most I've ever seen on here is about 75 in 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think if we drew a curve of how many people are in this room for meetings, 90% of the time it's 0, because we're not even in here. And then, it starts to ramp up slow, and 15 might be our average number of people, including us, that are in here for meetings. And maybe a couple times a year you get 30 or 40. So I look at that and think, if we can't find a way to use that space a little more regularly, it seems like it's just going to be a big empty room. And to go back and look at the comparison of our existing space versus what that looks like might also be interesting to
Yeah.
put a box of what the commissioner's room looks like up against that too. And,
I've
if we
actu-
need a room where we need 100 people, there's other options. We don't have to have it here.
With that, I like the thought of shrinking. I don't think we need what's in the 15,000 square foot, but I would like to almost see us move the garage to the back, like where the circle council would sit now, and have them enter in the back and change that, my thoughts, that front piece that's garage there to the public restrooms. The more I think about having them come in the vestibule or keeping that open, they're not really seeing and getting access to the liquor store as much as we talked about. Having the entrance there, having more signage, I think would direct people from the bathrooms, 20 steps up the street into the entrance of it, and keep that outside of the actual council area.
So you're talking about put it back up in that corner?
Yeah,
Yeah.
put the bathrooms up there,
And
move the
garage
garage
on here and make it
there,
smaller.
and make our council chambers a little smaller.
I think that's a good point, and I think there was some conversation about that a little bit earlier. Can we go back, Sarah, sorry, this one. So there was also an earlier version where this was moved out to the corner, and you could have public access there into the restrooms. So in other words, you could do a public restroom right at that point and move this space inside. And that would be another way, if you really want to get the bathrooms closer to the liquor store, than putting it on the corner. I'm not so sure I recommend it, but I just want, there are ways to move it closer, because I know there's
As somebody
concerns
who
about
sat in
that.
a building for 25 years without a window and any natural light, I really know that people that sit in an office all day, I would prefer, if we're gonna potentially rent out that space to people, that we would have that small amount of ambiance for them versus putting the restroom right next to the bathroom.
Was I don't want to cut you off.
No.
What, are my understanding, so like that orange, that would be like a conference room for like the partner groups, or that would also be like office space?
Well, that's something that right now it's just shown as
Okay.
a public conference room, boardroom. It's really quite large. But if you said, well, let's really accommodate our partners or something, we'd rework this to kind of show how it would work as a suite of offices of your partner organization. So you'd walk in one door, it would have the different organizations, and there'd be a series of private offices, a little conference room, so you have shared facilities. But yeah, we'd put it out there, so again, that's why we've moved it to that point, so they get the natural light.
And I think we talked about the different sizes of groups that have meetings in here, and that conference room definitely accommodates a lot of the, like, business coalition or chamber or those sorts of meetings that generally occur during the day. But that has to be the same space as the council chambers in my mind.
Yeah.
That-
So like make the orange space the like office space, and then
Office
use the
suites.
council chambers as this, like we're doing now, using it as a.
Yeah.
And the idea about bringing that down here and shoving that over and making that more accessible, and then pushing, because I agree, using the street for essentially a garage also is not the greatest idea, but having the public there, and we can do something kind of fun with that, so it doesn't look so utilitarian. It looks kind of a little bit more of a beacon, but it's then not part of the front door either of the city hall for that sort of thing. So, okay, I like that.
And we're really, anything that's not green on there, I think we're still questioning whether it's too big, like every single one of those spaces. So this is the biggest city hall we can imagine, the biggest garage space we can imagine, the biggest orange space, the biggest pink space, all those things. And I suspect we're gonna be able to squeeze them all down to be quite a bit smaller. That city hall space has 5 offices and 6 workstations for 11 staff people. And there's 4 of us that are in there right now. And then there's another maybe 3 groups that come in and use office space in there. So, and then maybe if we threw the EDA in the mix, we're talking about really 8 if everybody's in there at the same time today. And the utilities has talked about they might need another staff person at some point. They're probably at the bottom of their staffing level, and I suspect they'll grow. So maybe it gets to 9, but it's not going to get to 11. And even if it's 9, one of those is the street department, right? They're not gonna be there most of the time. One of them's the water and sewer, they've got their own offices in a different building, they don't really need a workspace here, they've also got space up at the Public Works garage. One of them's the electric group, and they have an office here now, but they don't really spend a lot of time in it, and they could use one of those workstation spaces. So I think that, you know, if we really put the squeeze to that space, we could find a way to make it a lot more efficient and wouldn't have to build quite as much of it. And then we also thought that garage, the original concept of that is garage door, big enough to park a piece of equipment inside, but we don't really need to do that. You know, we have garage space for all the equipment we own, plus some room for growth if we need it. You know, what would we park down here? Maybe the Bobcat, but I don't think so because we use it so much everywhere in town. It doesn't need to live here. It can live anywhere. It's going to have to travel wherever it lives. So that probably could get even a lot smaller. And we definitely don't like it in premium location spot there. So but that orange space then is really the good thought exercise that we need to figure out how to answer that question. If we're going to offer rental space to the Chamber of Commerce or to AEOA or to, you know, even the EDA if we don't want them to be in our office space. How much is that, and are they willing to pay it? And you know, we really kind of have to know that to go too much further.
Would there be other professional people that would be interested in having a space if we stayed with this square footage? Not necessarily the footprint that's drawn there right now. I mean, like you said, if you got rid of the garage or, you know, the actual city hall space itself, if we shrunk that down a little bit. Are there others that would want to come into a new building right here, right downtown, easy access? You know, maybe that's something that we need to think about, offering up some of that. Could we create some of that if there's an interest out there? And
Well, that was one of our
find that out.
one of our paths was, is this a public-private partnership again? And are we going to find a developer, and are they going to go chase down leads and find tenants to put in this building? And I don't know who's going to do that. And I think we kind of looked at it and then walked away from that concept because it's hard to imagine who's going to actually put that project together. And the EDA would be the ideal place to do that. That's kind of what we thought originally. But they're not set up to do that right now. They don't have the resources to. They'd have to really staff up and expand to take on that kind of a project because they've got one not full-time staff person right now that's doing 3 full-time jobs. So I don't know. Does that sound about right, Mary?
We could talk about the possibility of doing some preliminary research anyway.
Sounds like she wants a 4th job.
I just would hate to pass up the opportunity. I get we have restrictions. This is the time to visualize if we're gonna do that. I'd hate to pass up the opportunity. I'm certainly not trying to add any more to anybody else's plate. I get overload, but, you know, right now we're at the dream stage and what can we do? And again, if nobody comes forward, maybe somebody watching or people hearing this or the newspaper, somebody might come in and say, hey, I'd be very interested.
I mean, I've had people have that conversation with me
Okay.
regularly for 15 years in a row. I think there's some interest, but to translate that into a real partner that's willing to invest in some design work is a bigger step. And it wouldn't even have to be professional. I've had retail people say, I would fill 2 stores right now if you gave them to me. So
I would be a little cautious though, as starting to enter into that public-private relationship. You know, we have a government public purpose to serve, and not the interests aren't necessarily mutual. So you know, I think that there could be a lot of issues, you know, tied up with trying to bring in private enterprise into public building and justify that to taxpayers. But I guess my comments about the 2 concepts that you threw out there, I mean, I think you've probably over-designed for the space that we might need. You know, I think in our grandest plan, having a council chambers that accommodates 150 people is, you know, in my mind, you know, going to be a lot of wasted money. Money spent on something that maybe we could accommodate some other options. But, you know, I also like the idea of the public bathroom being an exterior access bathroom, just because of the visibility and the way it can be advertised, promoted. You don't want above the city hall sign, public bathrooms and city hall.
That makes sense.
You know, I think.
That's
you know,
probably the right order, though. if
well,
you're gonna
it
do
could,
that.
it could be. I mean, look at the size of the restroom signs we have out there now. Look at the city hall sign, it's this big, and
Yeah.
the bathroom sign is as big as the building, so. But I think that points out the importance of public restrooms and the need to have them in an accessible, visible location. So then, to me, then the interior vestibule becomes questionable. Why would we create all of that space to have just a pass-through to what? From the front to the back? I mean, it seems like we would spend a lot of money to build that space and really not gain much in value from it. I like the idea of trying to provide space for the EDA and possibly those other organizations that are currently here in the building. You know, I wouldn't necessarily be looking for additional tenants, but the relationship we've had with those others seems to have worked well. Now, whether they're interested in looking at some kind of a future and paying market rate rents and having some kind of a long-term agreements, we don't know that. So I think there's a lot of good things you've come up with here, but you know, I think there's some tweaks we need to.
Absolutely. Right, and that's right. So this version kind of starts to go
Closer.
You do closer to it. It moves the garage if we need it there. It has the public thing up there. It makes for a much smaller. And if this is really to be for 70, 80 people, you know, this could get pulled back in a way, and then we could bring in some more space perhaps for the EDA and the likes. And so this one seems to capture a bit more of what we're thinking in terms of the modest.
And how does that city hall space compare to the
previous one?
current city hall space?
Well, this one is yet a little, if you go 2 slides, I'm sorry, Sarah, can you do 2 ahead? 1, 2, oop, nope. Right, oop. So this is the larger version, so the one back, this one is yet smaller than that. So I mean, this is going down, because see, now we only have 4 offices, so this is going into that direction of trying to, it still has 6 workstations, which is way too many. But I think I'm talking with Mary and others and Kim about some storage. We need to introduce probably a little bit more storage in there, but we have to talk about that in a little bit more detail. So I think that can get yet shrunk again. This could move up. We could actually get a little bit more of the common space back here for delivery. So I think there's some merit to this direction that might be capturing a little bit more of what you're interested in. Because the other one, there's a lot of public space that is just that. It's really public space for people to walk in and through, and it gives a little bit more accessibility to it, but it's a lot of space, and it may just not be needed, it might be overkill. Regardless of whether this is for 100 or 80, which might be the way, you know, maybe we should really just try to focus more on 80s.
So
I almost like it better on the back wall by the garage, the configuration.
Do you like this configuration better or the other one?
You like the
Yellow?
council chambers down there?
I like the council chambers on that,
Back
on the
here.
back side, yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
So if we can go one back, more like
You
this,
know.
but moved over.
Right.
Yep.
What do
So
you like
that's,
about that?
in a way, you could see that if we did do it to here, you put that here, you basically create you don't walk all the way through, you walk into a bigger lobby that still has, you know, these things, part of it, but this gets pushed into here. We don't really need that, and this is the mechanical, which frankly with just pumps and everything today, because they'll be mostly rooftop units in this case, this can actually be as part of a penthouse. So we could get rid of that as well. And so then that.
Well, we may not even need to have a garage, that's to be decided yet, so council chambers
And then-
could be left there with those
Yeah.
other things potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, at a minimum, we're gonna need some kind of janitor space.
Sure.
So even if we don't have any workshop at all, we still need to have some cleaning supplies, and we actually have, with bathrooms here, we need a whole lot of paper products
Mhm.
and cleaning supplies.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
this
your
version
council
gives it-
chamber will need storage as well, I think of all this stuff, and, I mean, we're probably gonna have things in the ceiling that people can hear better, and,
yeah, we haven't talked about
you
AV
know.
at all,
y-
just to
yeah,
imagine that's gonna be
just coming out
accommodated.
of the
Yeah.
hospital and we did it, those things have to be included in your council area.
What- I like that, I mean, I like the orientation. What if, can you, sorry, Sarah, can you go up one?
Moving to the 13,000.
The one thing I guess I thought about when related to what Kelly was saying about earlier and natural light. It seems to me like the council chambers is just totally isolated, potentially, unless there's like some transoms or something up back behind.
Yep.
Um, And, which maybe that works just fine, but, again, relocating, does it make sense to put, I don't know. I personally like this better, and again, trying to shrink maybe a little bit and open up more space for the EDA or partner groups. I guess that's the only thing I really see about this one, short of, like I said, scaling down a little bit,
Yeah.
is the lack of maybe light in the council chambers, but, you know, only so you can be like, oh, we should wrap this up because it's really snowing.
Well, you know, we're in here 3 hours a week.
Right.
Those offices, there's people in them 50 hours a week,
Right.
so.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but the room's used for other things. I also like, if we're on the back wall and some window, it just feels a little bit more transparent, call me silly, but having some windows where people can see in and see what's happening gives it the feeling that we're not trying to hide behind closed doors and walls.
Is the liquor store the same size in both versions?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, to a certain extent, we're figuring that's driving, you know, I mean, that's where you make your money, and
Yeah.
that's an important one to make sure that
Absolutely.
we meet those requirements. Well, you know, these are all
For
comments
future
that
dispensary.
we need to take
Mhm.
and digest and come up with, you know, kind of modified versions that kind of address these. So what we hear is, it seems like having the public restrooms for visitors be just that, public, from the outside, not having them come in, so that's one thing. Making sure that the garage, however big it might be, is obviously not in that corner, bring it in the back. I actually don't like it in this corner because that's great daylight, and that's another thing that's not terrific. I guess, do we really need that? Or is it really literally just a small little, you know, do you really need a little work table, a workshop, or is a place just to park the snow blower or a small thing versus that? That's one thing that would be good for us to know. Council chamber, no more than 180? I mean, is that, we should try to see what happens if we're in the 80 range? And I'm doing that as 80 people in the audience, and we're accommodating, I think it'll be 9 folks at the dais. Is kind of what we're assuming would work along that.
I think that's, I mean, even if you were saying it was, maybe this one's a little smaller, the other one was 24 by 24, I mean, to me, even, you know, at 12 by 12, or 12 by 16, you can get, and again, maybe
For a garage?
for a maximum, for a place to park a snow blower or whatever, but they're not keeping, there's a snow, I think the idea of keeping this, and not having anything to do with the streets department, I think the idea of keeping a skid steer like down there, it just seems kind of, that seems, you know, fuels up somewhere else, like all these things, like just seems like it doesn't make any sense to have, you know, we just built a brand new garage that we built to make sure we could expand into if we needed to with new equipment, to
Right.
have something pulled out of that. I don't know. To me, it doesn't make sense to accommodate that in City Hall.
Would it be okay to explore some ideas without that then? Just to see what happens if we don't?
I'd love it if we didn't have one, but I'm going by what employees say to try to help them, but
Well, how much are you willing to spend to help them? It really gets down to that, how much space do we want to accommodate that? And I think it's up to us to really put that to the test with them. You know, it's one thing to open the conversation and ask, well, what can we do here, what do you use? It's a whole nother thing to say, all right, what do you really, really need to have? Like, what's it actually worth building new space here in terms of convenience factor? And right now, I mean, we just took over a fire station, you know, that was there. And we're not using it particularly efficiently, but there's a lot of parts and tools stored there that aren't used terribly often. And I guess it's kind of nice to be able, okay, we're working on the boilers. We only got to walk through this building to get some tools, and we need something else, and we can go back and grab it. That's pretty convenient, but that's not 10% of the time, you know, that they're working, that they're in this building doing stuff like that, so.
Hopefully they won't have to work on the boilers in the new place.
They will, though. I mean, they're gonna have to do all the
But even
stuff they
that,
do
like,
now.
But an efficient, but again, you're handed over they were handed over an old unused space and
Yeah.
turned into what it is. Whereas if there's a space that's designed by professionals and they say, well, here's what we'd want to have for on-site maintenance for taking care of these things.
And I think it gets a lot smaller.
I think that like,
Yeah.
Well, I think it's been a convenience to have that space just because it was there and accessible. But the reality is, for the amount of time that it's actually used, seems like it's, again, a lot of expense to build that space into a building like this. We just built a public works, utilities garage to accommodate all of the needs that the utilities and street departments and everybody asked for. So, I mean, I find it hard to think that, just out of convenience, that we should be putting that kind of space in the City Hall building.
Okay, well, we'll take a look at what happens if we don't have that, and you guys do your reconnaissance with staff and see, and you obviously Mike can call us and say, put it back in or make it twice as big.
Yeah. But bring more tools down here, Mike.
Yeah, we need more stuff.
They
You know,
have
just-
utility trucks.
They've got
carry
trucks,
tools.
yeah, they've got toolboxes. I mean, it's not just convenience. Convenience is money, and convenience is happy employees, and those are both things that are worth protecting, but, you know, at some point there has to be a comparison there, cost benefit.
on our
Well,
town's
we did-
not
we did
30
just
miles
build a-
across either.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
Facility
a mile away.
for them specifically to accommodate all of this use. I mean, there was a thought that building was gonna be gone, and there was not gonna be a garage down here for that use, so.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
I'm sure they would like to have it remain, just because it's been convenient.
Habit.
Well, yeah.
Okay, and then we should also look at including spaces for your partners and see the implication there. I mean, and one thing that might be kind of the trade, this, combined with that and pushing things around, you might end up with the same kind of square footage in this version if we went with that, around 14,000. It includes a better partnership space as opposed to the thing. Okay. Okay. So what I think would be good, we've got lots of good information, if we move quickly to the next few things. So this is part of the visual preference, and we just wanted to flip through a series of kind of 1- and 2-story buildings showing different kind of retail, kind of public spaces that kind of are in the scale of a small town, using kind of contemporary materials, using colored sets. So we can just flip through them next. Introducing brick, kind of more contemporary, going, bringing down canopies low, again, very simple kind of brick structures, kind of the market kind of look, again. We laughed, or we do something really funky with the architecture so everyone knows. Mike liked it.
I like
that
That's our liquor store right there.
Put it in there.
It wouldn't fit the character of the
We've got a
area.
fiberglass fish sticking out of a building down the street,
We need a
What is the
fiberglass
character? I
whiskey
can't
bottle
figure it out.
sticking out of it.
That's what I was gonna say, is if you're gonna do that,
Yeah,
at least like make it
fiberglass
look like
winds
a
are
beer
pouring
mug,
out
like
Yeah.
every year, but
neon lights like falling out to over.
So and again, kind of the market kind of feel, this actually is a market, whether it's a liquor store or not, that type of thing, and others are, kind of this type of metal and wood and glass. So I guess we just want, if we can flip back through them. Is there, what are you guys, of course, none of these show kind of like in our mind, I don't think, or maybe we do, we don't want it to necessarily look like a log cabin. Is there, and we want it to be kind of a small town, but I imagine, do we want it to have a kind of a progressive feel to it, or how blend of tradition and new, and I don't mean by being super modern or anything in that sense, but where are you guys interested in seeing this as fitting into your fabric? Is it, kind of like?
Well, I
the
think if you
co-op?
look across the street, the co-op is fairly new, that's wood. The senior center has got wood to it, so wood seems to fit, but I think then you're bringing in whether it's cement, brick, stone, maybe some metal in with it, but I think right in the neighborhood, just looking, across the street at some things newer, wood is definitely what's being used.
So are there any specific buildings in the neighborhood that you guys say, that's really cool, we'd like to see more of that in our town? No? I mean, it's the co-op one. You
Java
that?
I like
homes.
the co-op.
The co-op's fine.
Yeah,
Java.
Java House is cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think a combination of wood and stone, I think, kind of highlights kind of the features that people expect in the outdoors, not an urban setting particularly, but something that reflects kind of the heritage of the area, which,
So is brick optional? I mean, there's quite a bit of brick in there too,
Mhm.
so brick and wood, so that too would be.
there are some historic brick buildings in town,
Yeah.
I think combinations.
Well, this is kind of one of them.
Yeah.
And this corner here is.
Yeah.
It's brick, man, but
Yeah.
if it disappears, I mean.
Yeah, okay, so
Getting
can you
clogged.
advance a
You know,
couple?
Gunflint Tavern is
Yeah.
brick.
Because like
Yeah,
a very
the old
simple
Railroad
kind of,
State Bank.
kind of some brick elements
Your
tied in
bank
with
is
some
brick?
wood and contemporary. I mean, here's a brick and wood.
I actually like that one too, that one's struck.
Yeah, that one I don't mind.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
Is it?
We're gonna hope for that you don't say, I don't mind that one. We want you to go, wow.
I try to think, a lot of the comments, especially with Highway 61, that I keep hearing are people don't want urban, people don't want to be Vail, Colorado, people don't, so I'm trying to keep in mind, although it's changed, but there's a lot of Scandinavian heritage here as well. We also have a reservation here with a large native population. So I think just trying to keep in mind some of those aspects about what are we about. But I like that bottom, the wood, the brick, the iron, using iron outside, whether it's by entrances or whatever. To me, that kind of makes it a little bit more contemporary. But not as contemporary as the one that Mike liked.
So is the idea of using color in a way to draw attention to it, something that's, again, when you come down, bold colors, if you go to the back first ones, where you're using very bright, and a big, tall, sign at the corner for the liquor store type thing?
I like some sort of differentiation between like where the liquor store is versus where City Hall is.
Yep.
Because right now, everything just blends together. They have the same color awnings out front, they have the same brick, so to me, as far as like catching the eye, like with the retail side, whatever in the facade you do or in elevations and roof heights or whatever,
Yeah.
to me, I think that would be like obviously built out as a single structure, but the mix and the design elements and.
I think that's important, because I think we want to make sure the liquor store has its own identity, comparison to the city hall.
Yep. Okay.
Right
That
now,
makes sense.
we have little identity here, and,
Yeah, I can just, your eyes can
Yeah,
go
and the
right
one
past the
building
liquor
there
store.
has basically the orange and the brown, so whether it's using, different coloring that way or whatever, materials.
Yeah, I think the idea of actually separating them in terms of, even though they'll be the same development, there'll be some elements that kind of tie it together, but primarily you read one as a separate, the liquor, I think that's a good point, to read the liquor store as the liquor store.
Yeah.
And then there's the city hall and other buildings attached to it, and there's some harmony between the two, but it's not like you're trying to make it look like it's one building like this
yeah.
looks
I
like.
mean, I like the change in elevation, even though, we're not talking a two-story building, somehow the change in elevation of that facade that could distinguish one from the other, and whether it's contrasting colors or different type of face on it, whether it's wood or stone or brick, you know, different ways of, you know, kind of bringing out the differences.
So, dumb question. The liquor store actual legal name is the Marais Liquor Store?
What do you mean by legal?
Okay, so the powerhouse was the bar. I'm just thinking, even when we do signage, Marais Liquor Store,
We can call it whatever we want.
boring.
Yeah, I think
You
that
know?
a lot of times when new liquor stores get built, that's one of the things, and I think even Jim brought it up in his report, was give it a different name.
Yeah, because this used to be the powerhouse. The bar was the powerhouse. Even when I worked there in the 80s and 90s, many referred to still the liquor store as the powerhouse. You know, you go in and people like to write out their check. What am I naming it? So I'm just thinking of that too as we
I like the powerhouse.
try. I do too. There's
Throwback.
there's some
Yeah.
history
Way
to
throwback.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I like both the upper left and the right picture, it looks like there's differentiation on the facade, but that's actually just one space behind it.
Yeah.
This is a big, long wall here that we're getting on First Street, and I like that, breaking it up, even though it's all liquor store, breaking it up like that is cool. What I like about that right one is, that's what I picture, not that exactly, but this corner out here, if we're gonna focus on it, that it gets bigger and taller, that it's got some kind of garish sign that sticks out that everybody sees from a mile away, that's the liquor store.
Powerhouse.
Could we kind of shape it like US Bank Stadium on a smaller scale?
That's how you're gonna get your sloped roof.
There you go.
You know, because this is gonna be a standalone building, it isn't attached to any other, you know, part of the downtown, you know, there'll be parking lots or alleys or streets or whatever separating. You know, I mean, it's hard to see it in relationship to these photos, just because I can't tell what's extending beyond that.
Yeah.
But how will you get it to stand out from all directions? Here you've got primary focus of this corner. What's it going to look like from the other direction, and you know, some thoughts on how that looks from out in front of Bucks, or looking up the street from across from the senior center over this way. And
So we'll be, next time come, we'll have some elevations and quick, simple modeling so you can start seeing some of those things, again, as an idea. And again, we won't have to land exactly on it for the pre-design, but as long as you guys have a good comfort level, so we can then use that as the basis for putting numbers to it, and then, you know, you'll have time to revisit it. But so we'll do that, so hopefully we can get a little more particular stuff to respond to specifically, like we did in the plans. We'll modify those for you too. Okay. Okay, so then the last thing, flip through all the way. So the last thing I just wanted to talk, and then you guys can go into the rest of your business, is the construction sequencing. If you remember, Jim McComb was kind of adamant that you didn't move your store. You kind of kept it where it is, so people wouldn't break any habits. They know exactly where to go and how to go and do it. And he was particularly interested in, because of his concern about cost, about actually moving the coolers and the reach-in coolers. And those are very expensive to move, and to break it down and move it, and then to eventually probably close it down and move into new space eventually. He just thought that that was very expensive, and you lose this idea of its breaking habits. So the green is basically from the, when you walk in, of course you have the sales counter, point of sale. If that actually would get pushed over into the dumpster, and everything to the right where you have all the beer is the part that's represented by that green. So in other words, we'd take that down, we'd have to build a temporary wall there, and then we'd build very close to that, off to the right, to keep construction. Thinking that an option would be to use some sort of modular buildings that might be your storage buildings, that you could then use that to stockpile wines and other things, not your cooler. So you could kind of have easy access to them. And then the blue out in front was a thought, because I was going to say unfortunately, but I would say we need to make sure that we create a good sales counter, and it still has to be accessible. So we can't really bring in a modular unit because of the accessibility of going up into it would be easy, but then to get back down to get into where the beer is really hard. So I would think that we could possibly build a small temporary kind of structure, if you will, out in front, so you can walk in that door. Let's say you walk in from the west side. And, you know, it could be bright red, it could be very simple shed roof that you use for the 8, 9, 10 months that we're under construction. And kind of make it kind of a fun thing. And that gets torn down again once you take down the, you know, the green building and finish the site work. So then you would tear it down once you have the grand opening. Now, we're not 100% sure about, we just think this is one of the few ways to do this so you don't have to phase this construction, to keep it all under one contract and keep going, I think makes sense. And moving your liquor store in one fell swoop is the way you want to do it. It's hard to, I think that obviously there'll be some work on that backside, but it'll be very different. You'll be fully operating with deliveries and other things at that point into the new shop. So I guess the thing that I think you folks ultimately need to decide is, do you invest in the effort? It's going to cost money either way, but I don't know what's the best way to spend the money. To do it here so it stays in the spot, or to pay to move everything and to kind of almost rebuild a temporary liquor store as opposed to kind of doing a temporary location in a spot with
And
lean-tos.
how many square feet are in this space?
I didn't even go there. It was more of a concept, just saying, here are the 3 things you need. Green is you keep the existing, and you can visualize that, I think, how that works.
Is that
That's-
all the existing, or is it?
No, that's
No,
that's the existing little
Right at the
appendage.
counters.
Just the coolers?
So
Just
it's the
the cooler.
coolers
Yeah,
and the shelves
yeah,
in front
that's
of
what I
them
thought.
and the storage behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the sales counter is, of course, to the east of that, so that
Yes.
goes away.
Yep.
We build a little sales counter and some better place for the wine, because right now all the wine is towards the west.
Yep.
And according to Jim, that's actually rather inefficient, the way it's stacked, so we could probably get quite a bit of wine if we do it the way maybe Jim recommends behind it. So at least you've got a full wine, and you've got your beer, or you've got some spirits, you got the beer and wine. And then you can at least stockpile enough stuff in there so it's not like you're having trucks delivered all the time, because you're gonna run out of stuff, but you won't have the full storage capacity when you're open. Whether this, you need 3 of those to keep open, you know, I don't know how, and I don't know if Jim, who really does that kind of analysis, but that's beyond our capacity to figure that out, of what you would really need. So I don't know if we need Jim's help, Chris's help, or if someone has to help to kind of determine really what's needed there. And then we can, of course, work to put some numbers to it and help you figure out how to make that happen. But I think this is a really important part. I think you folks need to kind of figure out what your appetite is and how seriously the idea of not moving the liquor store to break habits is. Because this will have costs associated with it, and you'll have to get a permit to block off part of the sidewalk and other things there, but you're gonna probably do that anyway for construction, because they'll go out to probably to the street anyway,
Good thing it's our street.
for me.
Good thing it's our street, it's our.
Yeah.
We could always potentially put storage containers maybe across the street if we worked with somebody.
Yeah, I think there's room on our side too for
Yeah.
storage containers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what I envisioned that red thing being.
Right.
And like he said, maybe there's 3 of them.
Mhm.
Or we could just have the Johnsons drop off a trailer and leave, and then come swap it out next Thursday.
Well, there you go.
So that's it for tonight. We'll come back the next time, and we'll have to figure out exactly when that means, but when we come back, we'll have further detail and plans, and we'll have the detail and kind of what it might look like. And at that point, we might be able to start coming with some conceptual kind of budget level cost stuff, just based on kind of square footages and typical pricing for building out liquor stores and the like. Okay?
Great,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right. Not bad. Okay, so next thing on our agenda is Highway 61 and MnDOT's response. And that, of course, is talking about the 9 elm trees from last time. So, do you want me to?
We heard back this week. They contacted KGM, asked the question. KGM says for $4,600, we will not cut down those 9 trees this year and remobilize in November of 2020 to cut them down.
Well, I'm gonna go back to
Discuss.
where I left off our last meeting, and that's what's gonna be different in 12 months from now. I don't see anything that's gonna be different. I don't see a reason to pay $4,600 to wait to make a decision that, we need to make today, and, we're not gonna change our plans, MnDOT's not gonna change their plans. I think we need to put this to rest and move on. So,
What's the mobilization issue?
They've got a subcontractor that's gonna come and cut down all the trees on the project in a week's period in November. And if they have to come on site, do all that cutting, and then leave, and then come back a year later, that's the mobilization issue. So the extra cost is just to have the subcontractor come back a year later, because it's less efficient to do it twice.
Why are they doing it twice?
Because they're gonna cut down all the other trees this November, just not those 9 elm trees.
Oh, you got 200 other trees that are getting cut down.
I don't know how many there are.
I see.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of clearing and grubbing through the length of the entire project, anywhere that there's trees or shrubs.
So the
that are-
removal of all the trees is happening next month for the whole project,
Mhm.
not just the elm trees?
Right,
The whole project?
whole project.
Okay, so come up and do that, and then they're gonna charge 4,600 if they have to come back.
To take the 9.
Yeah, that's it.
I've been thinking about this. We had a lot of people that were very impassioned about it. I also go back to thinking about some of the things that Afa talked about. My passion is people. Obviously, people's passion, some were about trees and different things, so you struggle with that. But at the end of the day, the project is signed. We're going forward. It's in MnDOT's right of way, so ultimately the decision really doesn't lie with us. In the end, they're coming down. And I feel like if we push it off another year, 12 months from now, we're going to be right back doing what we did. People are going to be upset, angry. I think that we need to move forward. I don't want to spend $4,600 isn't a large amount to go back and ask taxpayers about in the scheme of things, but it's going to happen. So I don't think that we need to spend $4,600 to delay something that's really going to happen that isn't going to change. And I don't mean to minimize what people feel, but the project, like you said, has been in the works for 6 years. There have been many open sessions. There have been many opportunities to talk to City Hall, MnDOT, councilors, have input. And I felt like the majority of the people that really came and shared concerns were more or less county taxpayers than city. Some were city. Again, it's Grand Marais is the home, the downtown is the home to all people of the county. But I just feel like it's time to move forward. This is going to happen. Delaying it a year just is going to delay problems. And maybe in another year, as people start to see progress, things will look a little better and people's attitudes might change a little bit. It's going to be hard. I actually drove and paid some attention to the trees in the last few weeks, looking at them. Probably different than I ever have, but I think it's time to move forward.
Did they set a date for tree removal next month and when that's supposed to start?
I think it's next week.
Next week? First week in November?
All the flagging's in, did you notice that? They put like the clear right away.
Last week they were here to mark all the clearing areas.
So there's lath out with flagging on it,
Well,
which
there's
is the,
lath out, yeah, for the state right away.
but that's,
There's also lath out, are they removing that cobblestone wall next to the house on, the right of ways behind that wall? Are they not removing that?
They're not removing that.
Well, that's the problem people come and talk to me about. They look at these pink stakes and they're looking at what's between the pink stakes and the highway and they're going, are they taking that down? Are they cutting that down? Well, some things they are, some things they aren't, so people are confused. So, I mean, when they come and do this, people will know, obviously, because they'll see it, you know, what they're gonna do. And I don't think a lot of people know what they're gonna do. I don't know what they're gonna do. I mean, I see the lines, but I don't know what that means,
you know,
you know. I don't know if you do. I don't know who does, really. But now we're talking 9 trees. I thought it was 7.
No, there's 11, 2 of which are not going to get cut down, 9 of which are.
Okay.
and the two that aren't are the ones up on the Voyager side in front of Voyager. Am I correct on that?
There's one in front of Voyager, one in front of the Arrowhead building,
Okay.
Cool Banker building.
Call it
Okay.
a banker, okay.
Well, so I guess if there was interest in a motion to ask for this change order, then we'd need that, and otherwise if we don't do anything on it, then things will proceed as they are right now. I guess my take on it is that I agree with what Kelly had said. We actually went back through after the last meeting. We went through a bunch of the old, like the Grand Marais history books, and looked at all the old pictures of when like the Java Moose was a gas station, and looked at all those different things, and it was kind of interesting to see that those trees aren't really that old. I mean, they are, but even, in the 1950s and 60s, you couldn't see those trees anywhere in any of the photographs. I think it's, I have also been paying more attention to them, and I think it's a shame, but I also think that the greater good of this project and the inputs from so many people to get the project where it is, I think we move ahead. The $4,600 or so, what is the change order cost to have them come back, happens to be pretty close to what the cost of planting 9 trees is going to be on the project. So, that keeps us that much closer to, having the money to be able to plant new trees. So, anyway, that's all I have to say about it, I guess. And if there's a motion, I'd entertain it now, otherwise I'm gonna keep on moving here. If there's any other discussion?
Keep going.
Yeah.
Well, the only discussion I have is I know somebody mentioned they'd raise money to do it, but I'm not saying that they're gonna. I mean, that was brought up at a meeting, you heard that. I'm not trying to delay this thing, I'm just repeating what was said at a meeting, that's all.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Well, I don't think I think that's been the whole thing in all of this, and this is just one more step that actually had a lot of, at least in the way I see it, is a lot of public feedback on it is that we're
Well, they're removing all the trees basically a year early. I mean, really, to prep for the project, right?
yeah.
Downtown, the work that's going to happen in 2021, it's a year early. A lot
Right.
of the work's going to happen in 2020 and other
Like
parts of
the
the
trees,
project.
when are they doing that culvert by Sister's Place? Next year or the year after?
Next year,
Okay. Next
2020.
2020.
summer or whenever they start?
Yeah.
So all those trees by the dental office will be
Right.
brought down.
Well, yeah, they're part of this project.
Yep.
Right.
And they're on private properties.
Yeah. Question, I mean, this is off the street subject right now, but I do have a question. What's the date on the MPCA dig? The following year?
2021.
2021?
Yeah.
Okay. Why June? Why are they doing it June 1 to July 15th? Why can't that highway be altered in our slower times, our slower months? April, November. Why in the middle of the summer? Why 45 days of a 130-day summer business? That's my question. And I think we need to push somebody on that to see if we can't change that timing on that. It just seems ironic that you want to tear the highway up in the middle of the summer when you could do it in the spring or later in the previous fall, for example.
I think you have
I mean, they could be digging it up right now.
road restrictions are on until, usually middle of June, so you can't be hauling.
I was say, would it have something to do with weather also? I mean, I don't know if it's firm dates.
There's not
or
road
if
restrictions on Highway
they're-
61.
But you
They're
to
gonna
get
be
to all the pits
hauling
there are.
material,
Well, I'm just,
yeah.
I think the timing is,
They've got a whole lot of engineers that worked a long time on that I'm sure would be happy to try and answer
well,
your
I know they
question.
got a whole lot of engineers, but they're not, yeah, I understand all that.
I mean, if you
But
wanted to
there's
get an answer,
there's
that's
no
what I'd ask.
consideration to the damn businesses on the highway, period. That's the thing that bothers me. That's 45 days of shutting down the highway. Okay, and rerouting traffic around the community, basically. It's not gonna be good for anybody in business in this town, period. And I think a different time might have been better than June. That's just, nobody's pushed them on it, nobody's asked it, we're just letting them roll their little program over us. And I think that we should have some more input into, why'd you pick that time?
Well, I don't think what you said is accurate, Craig. I think that they've involved a lot of people in that conversation. I think there's been a lot of pushback.
Oh, I know, yeah, but they
And my
haven't considered,
recommendation
but they
is-
haven't considered the business.
They have considered it, and my recommendation
Well, I know
is
that-
if you
well-
want to know more about that conversation that they've had. and
Well, I'd
what
like
the
to know,
reasons are-
because I sat here and listened to the state guy said he had packets signed from every business person on Highway 61. I got my letter, and there's 17 businesses that haven't signed a packet. There's 17 people that hired attorneys now to fight the state.
If you want to
and-
know about
and
their
I'm just
staging
saying-
conversation, then I would ask their construction engineers who were involved in it.
Oh, I asked a lot of questions during this process, and I get no answers. So that's how they work. And it's unfortunate, very unfortunate. You settle. We'll all be settling. People and businesses will be settling after this project's done, 2, 3, 4 years later. And this is what's been put into our lap. And it's unfortunate that a little design morphed into this great big project, and I don't think a lot of people sat back to consider the economic impact it's going to have. They don't do economic impact studies anymore because they can't get these projects to start if they do one, because people see.
Have you talked with anybody in Two Harbors at all to see how they felt it went for them or how they felt it impacted them?
I
I mean,
don't,
they just went through this for.
I don't remember
a
their
year and
highway
a
being
half.
closed down for 45 days, going through town there.
So,
It's a whole
no.
different deal. Partially a different deal. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Kelly, but it's not apples to apples.
There was,
Nothing's gonna be apples to apples, and
So
well,
I've said
I
enough,
think-
I'm done talking about it. You guys can decide what you want to do. It is what it is.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna step back. You guys can decide what you're gonna do.
No,
Are
I'm
we
just
not
saying,
here as
someone's got to
group
make a motion
together?
and we can all vote and that's fine. I'm not going to talk about the issue anymore because it's mute, okay? We all know where we sit. I just think you need to understand something. We just passed a 20% change order on a half a block of street. Okay? This is a $2.3 million our investment here is 2.3 million. Now, just so you know, it could possibly be 20%.
Yeah.
That's $500,000. So,
I don't think any of us are happy with where I mean, I guess I won't speak for anybody else. I'm not personally happy with what I feel like for being involved for several years before I decided to run for city council, and now in my second term, having gone through this project. Like, I feel like a lot of aspects of it leading up to when MnDOT really decided to, like, all right, like, here we go. Like, I feel like there's been a lot of frustrating things that have happened along the line. And I feel like, you know, when we signed the paperwork to say, like, yeah, no, we want to do this project, we had to, because that's how it works when you're working with MnDOT on one of their roads that runs through your town. You're ceding control to them, and it's a super uncomfortable position. I mean, there's very, like, in my private life, like, very few things that you'd ever, like, want to approach in that way. And so then when you're here trying to represent people and make good decisions, to be able to be like, this is just the way it is, I guess, it sucks. It's a terrible feeling. I mean, so I'm not trying to, I will say, I don't have a business that's on the highway. I use the highway every day.
nobody on that design team did.
But I do think that, like, I've been to meetings that the chamber has hosted in regards to how things can be done and managed, especially regarding traffic, to try and ease the burden of what the impacts are going to be. Because it isn't just businesses within the corridor that are going to be impacted. They absolutely will. And I think, at least from the people that I've talked to that have brought things up to me, that it seems to me that they have finally, it maybe it's taken a little bit of time, but there has been things, and things have been addressed. But I think it doesn't matter if you're on Wisconsin Street, it's going to affect you. You know, if my house is on the reroute for the traffic, like, that's kind of going to be a drastic change. You know, I mean, people on 8th Avenue, which of course you have to deal with that too. You know, it's a big thing, and I do think that the economic impacts during the project are going to be negative. But I think what is going to come out of it when it's all done, and what is going to be there in the positive economic impacts, hopefully that's why we felt like this was a good project, because we think that it's the right thing to do for people and commerce to happen in the city and on the highway. That's, I guess, my 6 cents on it.
Well, when we heard that the highway was going to have to be closed down, I think there were a number of issues raised about that and the economic impacts that was going to have on businesses throughout the community, whether they're Highway 61 businesses or downtown businesses. There was a video that was shown from Alexandria that had talked about a project that they had done in downtown Alexandria too, that had shut off their main business corridor and closed that down. And you know, they had, that video showed interviews with the business owners, how concerned they were about the economic impact and their businesses, you know, during that time that the highway was going to be shut down. But a year later, after the highway was opened up, almost every one of those same people that expressed the reservations were on board with the value of the improvements and the business that it brought back to them. You know, so it wasn't as if there was no understanding that this was going to have a serious economic impact on the business community. It is. I mean, I think as a business owner, I know, you know, our businesses are going to be impacted. You know, as a highway business, I think they're going to be even more significantly impacted. You know, I don't know how you get around that. You know, when I mean, I've driven through other communities where, you know, looking for a gas station, I could see them, but I couldn't get there. And, you know, I mean, I had a feel for those businesses that, you know, you were trying to get to, but you couldn't find a way to find an access. I think we're going to suffer with that. It's going to be hard, and I think we have to figure out how
how to best get to the other side of this and see the benefits in the long run.
Well, I know the businesses, I know the business is gonna, when the project's done, we all know that, you know, the tourists aren't gonna disappear. We can't pump any more people through this town that we do already in the middle of the summer. So I know the business is gonna come back. I'm just looking at minimizing the impact. And I think that digging up the highway in the middle of June into July 15th is not minimizing the economic impact. I think there might be better timing that might work better. That's all I'm suggesting.
Hadn't they talked about potentially moving it weather dependent? Why do I not remember something at a meeting that we talked about it here, and they were going to look, I think it's used as,
I think it has to do with the other projects that are gonna be
Very-
happening at the same time they're doing that. When they
Yeah,
do
but
that, they can tear apart a bunch of other stuff and not have to deal with traffic.
but
And
I
think
seem to
that's what it's
remember them
kinda
saying that they would
all
try
about.
to move it up into May, again, weather dependent, frost lines, all that stuff, which,
No, I don't know.
you know,
I'm just,
I know I've had snow in my
I know
yard.
it's scheduled for June to July 15th, and as far as I know, that schedule hasn't been moved.
That's a concept schedule, though. They actually will start as quickly as they can start when the season allows, and they'll finish as quickly as they can finish getting through the work. They're just trying to give an estimate based on what they think is realistic. And, you know, the meeting you're talking about is one of multiple meetings that MnDOT has hosted.
Yeah, I know.
That many business owners attended and offered their feedback to MnDOT. And changes have been made to that schedule based on that feedback. So I just don't think it's fair to characterize that the way you did, that
Well,
they're
that
not
changed-
listening
that
to
was never
anything,
changed.
that no one's ever considered any of that, because it's just not true. They have considered it.
Well, when you, okay, I'm not gonna argue with you, but when you tear the highway up the middle of July,
We've
that-
got, we
that-
have a short construction season.
well, we got a short tourist season.
Yeah.
It's 130 days, 120 days, you know, I'm not just talking about me and my store, I'm talking about other people, like, that's not gonna affect me as bad, it's gonna affect the people from Broadway over, you know what I'm saying?
Sure. And a lot of them
So
have been
that's,
involved in
that's
this
my
conversation.
concern, you know, to minimize the impact to them is what I'm thinking about.
Yep.
And if it's possible to minimize it, I would hope that we take the effort to try to minimize it by working with our engineers and working with the DOT.
So
That's
what I'm
my
trying to
suggestion.
tell you is, I think that's been done.
Well, okay. Well, then-
And if you want to know more about that.
See, I didn't know that they might do it earlier, like you just suggested, so,
Okay.
I mean, that's what I did not know.
I mean, there's been a lot of effort in trying to get that schedule to work as well as it can for everybody that's going to be affected by it. And I don't know that it's perfect yet. And if you want to keep talking to them about it, we can invite them to come back up here.
Well, we got it, it's not till the following year, so, right?
Right.
Right.
Well, they heard it, I mean, completely clear that the earlier that they can get the highway reopened, the better it will be for the business community. And they know that it's a significant impact. They readily admitted to that. And, I mean, they had offered scenarios where they could have drawn out the construction over 2 seasons, and we would have been dealing with single lane of traffic for 2 seasons, and, you know, that didn't seem to make sense to extend it over 2 seasons either. I mean, it's like, then you'd have the worst of, you know, the world in 2 years in a row. And, you know, maybe you can weather a few months of a bad condition, but can you weather 2 years of bad economic conditions? That's pretty chancy for a lot of small businesses.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. I think that it's a topic that we should probably keep pushing on, just to try to make sure that an attempt is made to lessen the impact of the highway being closed, that's all. And the timing of it, that's what I hear from a lot of people that are gonna be affected with that stretch of highway there.
I think it's interesting to look at, after the last meeting when we had the areas for the MPCA portion of the dig, and like where they think that the plume is and where the potential for where the plume could be. I mean, even if you look at that amount of area that expands to, if they don't need to go that far, like, to me, I'd imagine that cuts down, I'm assuming if they're giving an estimate that they have to go all the way out to do this full perimeter that you saw on those maps, those engineered maps, if they didn't have to do all that, it's like that could be multiple weeks of savings right there on time. I mean, if you don't have to take out, you know, so, I don't know. I feel, I haven't been this, like I said, my business isn't affected by it. The couple meetings that I was at, that both Visico County and the Chamber were there, along with many business owners, I felt was even the marketing side of it through Visico County, of making sure that they, you know, people felt supported, and the Chamber trying to find solutions within the MnDOT structure, so. I don't want to shut you down either, Craig, I will want to, you know, but you're good?
Yeah, I just wanted the discussion. I just
Yeah.
think it's important. It is to some people, I mean, it is to the business people, I know that.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't affect you, it's easy to just talk about it and forget about it.
Well, I think it
That's the
absolutely
thing,
has,
you know.
I mean, yeah, all right. So, anybody read the audit proposal in its entirety?
Where was our 2018 presentation?
We never scheduled one. I thought it actually went better this year than last year. So if you'd like them to do that, we can still get them to come up here. I mean, we did distribute it.
Yeah, I know. And there's some audit management things in the letter and all that stuff, but we had no presentation, and I'm not comfortable as a public entity not going through that and not having it for the public to see. When we talk about transparency, that's pretty big. So I know we're going into 2019, but I would like to see that we have some sort of presentation done by them. I'm also wondering, when I look at the cost of what they're considering charging us, it's pretty large. If maybe we should look at putting these, I know that we've been with them for a very long time. Have we ever gone out on bids, or do you know when the last time was anything's ever went out on bids? Have we ever opened it to bids?
Well, not in the time that I've been here,
Okay.
no. And
I thought we opened it one time, but they still stayed with
I don't remember that. Maybe we did one time. But yeah, it's been this group since, well, at least the mid-90s, I would think. So,
I can tell you that the EDA, wasn't there some change at the Secretary of State's office, I thought, with like entities and auditing, like where there was like a price? I remember like when I first got on the EDA, I thought they like all of a sudden let our number that we budgeted for auditing, like it like doubled. I thought, was there some like cap or something that went away or something?
no, the state actually conducts the EDA's audit.
Oh, but they just charge more now.
They must have just raised their
That's
prices.
what it is,
Yeah.
sorry. But
Yeah.
it's really close to what this number is,
Oh,
what I thought was like. oh.
I'm aware of what auditing costs can be in two different fronts now. We start ours next week, but I definitely want to see a presentation done. I think that that's a good thing for the council, although I would, obviously, the last one we had done, several of us were not happy with at all. So I don't know if they have a different presenter, if they want to actually come here to present. I don't know what our options are. We would have paid for 2018 already. I don't know if we paid for something that didn't happen, or if we just didn't pay, get charged for that.
I don't think it's clear in this document either, and this is basically the same document that they've been using annually, that they're going to provide an on-site quality presentation of the audit. So if we want to re-engage them, then I would recommend that we at least clarify that in this proposal, and then we can ask them to also provide that for this year.
I would like to have an on-site quality presentation.
I think in that, I agree with you. If you're gonna do it, like over the phone, doesn't seem like the most.
No, and when we didn't always have, when I was in my former position, they would do it via television, ITV, which worked fine because everything was up on the screen. You could still ask questions and have conversation with them, but the telephone thing did not work for me. It was very hard to follow, and the presenter was very hard to stay with. So I would like to see that. I will make a motion that we engage them for the 2019 audit, because I believe it's too late to try to switch things around. But I think over the next several months, we should talk about maybe considering a bid. And not that we have to, not that that presentation, they've never done anything wrong. I just think that being in a public entity, that might be something that we want to consider and go out for bids for so many years potentially, but that can be discussed at a later time. So I would make that request, the 2018 presentation, and then I would move to approve Walker, I'm going to look at this again, Walker, Giroux, and Hahne for 2019's audit.
All right, it's a motion. Does anybody want to second that?
I'll second that.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
That would come to the end.
With that, we have come to the end. Craig, anything?
We haven't had a park board meeting since the last.
Haven't had one? Okay.
Nothing to report?
My minutes, I included minutes from the YMCA meeting. I also had a question, it's a little early, but our November 27th meeting is the night before Thanksgiving.
No, it always is.
Is it really?
It always is, but we usually change it.
Unless there's a fifth Wednesday, it always is. Yeah.
So, just something to think about. I didn't know
We'll probably have to change it. Well, I'm not gonna.
who was
might be
around,
here, I
so.
don't know. I might not be here. but-
Will you be here that week?
Even if we moved it to
Tuesday?
Earlier,
Tuesday
yeah,
night.
we'll probably, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll send that idea around and get responses from you.
Okay.
That's it. Anton,
I don't think.
you're the last one, so nobody's gonna say something to remind you to think of something
Yeah, I
later.
know.
I'm gonna give her.
Well, when you're done, I got something. I just got, after last week's meeting, there were 2 emails that were sent. One by Mary, one by, Jim. That were sent out in the morning, right after that meeting, and they were concerning things that I said at the meeting. And, one was about not knowing about the MPCA dig, but I did know about it. And the other part of it was about the highway being closed, which didn't happen till later in the process. So I want to correct, Mary had talked about that. The other one was I had said that, I was quoted by saying I had said something about the committee on signing and helping businesses be aware of how people can get to the businesses. That all got changed when County Road 7 got rerouted for the overpass by the bypass, and the cars have to go up to the Gunflint now. And I never said that they gave up their efforts on trying to help the businesses. I just said that plan was not gonna work. But Jim Boyd had said that I had told everybody that they had given up on their efforts. I never said that. And so if they're gonna send emails out, not mentioning my name, but obviously I was the one that was talking, I just think it could be done a little tastefully than sending a mass email out to every business in Grand Marais. You know, I haven't answered the email. I decided not to, but I think I want to talk about it, and I just think it wasn't right. I never said that they gave up their efforts on helping. I mean, that was an effort that they wanted to do, was put signs up on the top of the streets directing people down. But when we took that traffic away from the YMCA and shot it up to the Gunflint, that concept isn't going to work. That's all I said. I didn't say they gave up their efforts. So I don't know what's...
I don't think I saw that email.
I got copies of them if you want them. I'll forward them to you.
I got Mary's, but I don't think I got.
Jim Boyd went to every chamber member, and I'm not a chamber member, so Oh, I got it.
Oh, that one I did not
Won't take
have
it,
an
buddy.
email.
All right,
Anyway, I just wanted to mention that, so.
okay. I don't have anything else. You do though.
I do. Jay would have brought this up if he was here. The library board has some news, and perhaps you've heard Steve Parsons tendered his resignation.
Whoa.
He's got a job in Rochester that he's going to be taking on in November. So November 12th will be his last day, and we've started the recruitment process for a new director. So the library board will be involved in that, and we've got some ads that we're about ready to send out, and here we go. So
Wow.
this transition, Steve's been here for a number of years now, and he's offered us a lot of really great service, and he'll be missed. But something different about this transition is we have an assistant director, which we didn't have when we opened it up and Steve took the job. So that'll help out quite a bit with the staff over there in the transition. We're also looking for another library clerk right now as well, so they're going to be a little short-staffed for a bit. Hopefully everybody can remain patient.
Good thing it's
Their
winter.
goal is to provide seamless service as if nothing has happened. I've suggested that they don't have to have a goal that's quite that lofty, that people will understand, but I like where their head's at anyway, so we'll keep you posted as that develops.
Okay. Kim? Patrick? Okay, 8:25. We're adjourned.
Okay.
There you are, not a record.